Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this total coverage special, Mental Health in Maine. I'm Megan Torgeson.
I'm John Chrysos. Right now, May, it is Mental Health Awareness Month, and whether it's a lack of understanding, maybe fear, or inaccurate portrayals of mental illness on TV or movies, there is a stigma about talking about this. Our mental health.
Yeah, and together with our friends at Sweetser over the next hour, we hope to learn more about why checking in with your mental health is just as important as checking in with our physical health as well. 1 in 5 American adults experience mental health issues every year. In Maine, roughly 223,000 adults have a mental health condition. Now, if you think about it, that's more than 10 times the size of Augusta. As recently as 2021, more than 37% of Maine adults reported symptoms of anxiety or depression, and of those, more than 12% were unable to get counseling or therapy. And when it comes to our kids, 1 in 6 between 6 and 17 years old experience a mental health disorder each year. 14,000 young Mainers between the ages of 12 and 17 have depression. High school students with depression are 2 times more likely to drop out of school than their peers. And Mainers between 12 and 17 years old who have depression did not get care last year.
So tonight we'll hear from Mainers about why they decided to get help for their mental health. Plus, we talk with experts about the treatment process and what you can expect when you talk with a counselor.
And when it comes to mental health, men are less likely to seek help. We'll hear from one Maine mom who's created a group to raise awareness and encourage more men to seek treatment.
There are resources available right now if you do need to talk to someone. Jessica Gagne will introduce us to the Opportunity Alliance and take us inside their mobile crisis response team.
And later, Terry Stackhouse talks with former ABC journalist Dan Harris about his very public panic attack that led to a new mission in meditation and how mindfulness can help you right now.
But we do want to note this, a few warnings as we get started. Everything you hear tonight should not be taken as medical advice. You should still seek a licensed medical professional. You'll also hear stories of self-harm and suicide. If you are having similar thoughts, there is someone to talk to right now. You can call or text the Suicide Crisis Lifeline at 988. That number is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Also 211 Maine. You can connect with someone and they'll connect you with a wide array of mental health services all throughout our state.
And when we talk about going to therapy, you may be picturing a small room with a couch and a counselor. Well, that approach works for a lot of people, but maybe it doesn't work for you, and that's okay. Jamie Azoulay explored a couple of alternatives that might be worth a try if that traditional method isn't a right fit.
When it comes to taking care of our mental health, it's all about what works best for you. So therapy might sound like this.
Or it could look like this. Dance movement and music can be used along with or in place of traditional therapy.
It's really about what the person's needs are, how they connect, how they process information.
Michelle Juber is the clinical director at Ellie Mental Health in Falmouth. She's also a dance movement therapist.
You don't have to be a dancer. It's about you being able to connect to your body, being able to hear what your body is telling you and pull from the signals from there.
With a combination of big and small movements, she says people of all ages can participate.
And just notice how that starts to feel.
For some, they're learning to regulate their bodies. Others may be working through trauma or focusing on memory.
Anybody that is feeling disconnected from their body in any way or detached from their body and their emotions, dance movement therapy can be really helpful for.
Music therapy takes a similar approach.
And it allows them to access parts of themselves that they might not have even known about or recognized, and then explore all those feelings through sound.
Kate Beaver runs Maine Music and Health in Portland, helping clients with a wide variety of instruments, like drums.
I might say, okay, copy my rhythm, and they'll go. We make it a little harder as we go on, and then we'll just play together for a while and have a beat going and just really enjoy the energy of the drum, but it allows people to take time for themselves that they probably wouldn't otherwise and connect with that beat.
And mallet instruments and the piano, too.
We just improvise together, do a breathing exercise, and then talk about, how that felt and how does it feel to kind of get out of your comfort zone, and is it bringing up any memories? Is it bringing up any thoughts about what's going on in life?
She also does exercises with bells. But you don't have to use instruments or meet with a therapist to benefit from music therapy.
Put a song on and then intentionally breathe along and time to it, and your brain will connect to that rhythm, even if you're just tapping your toe, and like it just starts to bring your heart rate down and your breathing rate down and even lower your blood pressure.
If music and movement aren't the right option for you, you might also consider equine, art, or drama therapy too. Reporting for Maine's Total Coverage, I'm Jamie Ashwale.
And knowing where to start if you're looking for a therapist or any kind of therapy can sometimes feel overwhelming. Joining us now is our friend Jane Van Bramer, the president and CEO of Sweetser. Jane, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me and continuing these important conversations.
They really are. And so let's start at the basics, the beginning, Therapy 101. For people watching at home, when is a good time to see a therapist?
Well, if you are experiencing repeated emotional problems that really start to interfere with your day-to-day activities, it's probably a good time to reach out to a therapist, and you could probably benefit from therapy. So if you're feeling overly anxious or just overwhelmed, I would encourage you to reach out. A therapist could help you.
And when you do decide to seek therapy or seek a therapist's help, what do you look for in a therapist?
Well, the most important thing is to really find somebody you can connect with, that you can establish a rapport with. This is a person that you're going to be disclosing some personal details about yourself. So you want someone who listens to you, who is interested in what you're saying, someone that you can really develop a trust in. And you can determine that usually during the first visit. And I also advise people, don't be afraid to change if it's not working for you. Even before the first visit, though, I would suggest you ask a lot of questions. You want to ask what kind of treatment they provide. Is it what we call an evidence-based treatment? Is it one of those therapies that we know has a higher likelihood of being successful? What are their qualifications? Have they treated people with your kind of problems before? Did they graduate and start work a month ago, or do they have years of experience? And setting expectations. How long will treatment last? When can you expect to feel better? And finally, I think it's important to talk about finances. What will it cost? Are they in network with you? Do they have a sliding scale? If your car breaks down on the way to an appointment, are you still going to be charged? And go through that kind of, even before you walk in the door.
Very important to ask those questions. And I think also to follow up on what you just said about changing. If someone's not right for you, that doesn't mean that therapy's not right for you. It just might be the wrong therapist.
Absolutely correct. You really do need that connection. You need to feel ease having those discussions.
And speaking of connection, since the pandemic, a lot of people have been doing those online therapy, those telehealth appointments. And sometimes I feel like that might lose the connection. That's so popular now. What would you say to someone that said, I think that that's impersonal, or it doesn't work for me, or will it still work for someone?
That's very insightful. And to tell you the truth, there's pros and cons to either one. So I think in terms of, making your appointments, there's data that shows online appointments, people make more of those appointments because it's accessible, it's convenient, it's easy. But I would say that it's easier to establish a connection when you're sitting with someone. And we all know a lot of communication is nonverbal. So if you're my therapist and you're asking me a question and I start to jiggle my foot, if I'm on a video camera, you might not see that.
Right.
But if you're in a room with me, you're going to see that nonverbal reaction and know that's an area that you want to talk more about. I think, one of the programs Sweetser runs is our eating disorder, which is largely telehealth. And that allows us to reach people all over the state. So when you're in a rural area, rather than travel several hours to get a service, especially a specialty service, virtual appointments can really be the ticket. But there are pros and cons to either one.
Yeah, and something that the patient would have to weigh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, Jane, thank you so much. We're going to be checking in more throughout the hour.
Sure.
John, back over to you.
A lot of important information there, Megan. Thank you. And much more ahead on this Maine's Total Coverage special, including a mother's mission to help other parents after her son took his own life. Her tips on talking with her teenager about their mental health. But first, men were less likely than anyone else to seek treatment for mental health. I speak with a Maine woman who's on a personal and painful journey to help change those statistics. That's next when Mental Health in Maine, a Maine's Total Coverage special, returns. And welcome back to this Maine's Total Coverage special, Mental Health in Maine. When talking about our mental health, one group that doesn't seem to be talking much is men. While May is Mental Health Awareness Month, June is Men's Mental Health Month, and recognizing the signs that you or a loved one might have a mental disorder is the first step in getting treatment. While both men and women experience the same mental disorders and conditions, men can experience different symptoms. Some of the common symptoms include anger, irritability, aggressiveness, noticeable changes in mood, appetite, or energy, difficulty concentrating, misusing alcohol or drugs, and persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. More than 6 million American men suffer from depression every year, but male depression often goes underdiagnosed. More than 3 million U.S. men have a panic disorder, agoraphobia, the fear of being outside, or other phobias, for example. And a recent study found that only 40% of men with a reported mental illness received mental health care service compared with 52% of women. And one more statistic here that affects men more than women: suicide. The National Institutes of Health find that men in the United States take their own lives at a rate of 4 times higher than women. It's something a Maine mom is trying to change, and for her, it's painful and personal.
It says, "Dear Mom, love you, Trent." That's actually Trent's writing. I wanted to get a tattoo that kind of honored him.
Angela Witten carries memories of her son Trent with her wherever she goes.
I have 2 boys. Trent was my youngest. He has an older brother, Caden.
2 years ago, Trent took his own life when he was 18.
Wait a minute.
Angela says she knew her son was stressed. He told her in a text the night before he died, but she had no idea the depth of what he was feeling.
I don't think they know how to deal with a lot of those big emotions. And then if you throw in there some mental health challenges like depression and anxiety, there aren't any words in our language to describe how that felt as a mom.
She's now on a mission to channel her grief into good. Her nonprofit, Stay for Life, works to save lives by advocating specifically for men's mental health.
That's all I want you to do is talk about men and their mental health and breaking that idea that, they can't cry, they can't show any kind of weakness or vulnerability or things like that.
The organization is still in its early stages, but is already hosting events to raise awareness, handing out magnets, self-care reminders, and recently launched man-to-man peer support groups.
I am so incredibly passionate about this cause that it's easy to just dive in and do it 24/7.
On the clinical side, researchers are only now starting to tease apart the biological factors that may impact mental health.
And what men have to understand, to the best that they can, is this is a disease that has overtaken them. It's taking their thoughts and totally distorting them. And it's not really them. And they just got to tell people about it.
Dr. Kaplan says recognizing the signs that you or someone you love may have a mental disorder is the first step toward getting treatment. And it really seems just having these conversations, really just to kind of put it out there and say, hey,
yes,
it's okay for two guys to sit down and talk about this.
It really is okay. And it's okay for a man who's depressed to have the courage to tell somebody about it. Because that's what it really comes down to. And a lot of people are afraid to ask a guy if they're suicidal because they're afraid that they're going to put some sort of idea in their head. And the research shows that's the furthest thing from the truth. You got to have that conversation.
Dr. Kaplan says women have more reported episodes of depression, but studies show that's because they're more likely to get diagnosed and get treatment. But Angela says we can all help change that.
You know, whenever anybody, talks to me about what we do and about how they can help, I say, just talk.
And Jane Van Bramer from Sweetser back with us here again. And I think the million-dollar question here is, why are men not going to seek treatment when there is help available?
I think certainly we have societal expectations that men are supposed to be strong and not be vulnerable and not appear as weak. So I also think that it's important to understand that sometimes these illnesses look different in men, as you talked about. We know that men experience higher rates from suicide. However, they're less likely to be diagnosed with depression or bipolar disorder, and we know that's related to the completion of suicide. So I think, it's important to have these conversations, to normalize this, to let them know you're not alone, that help is available, and also to just, continue to stress that you can get better. There's treatment available.
And we were just talking while we were listening to that about these peer-to-peer support groups and how important that is. And something that you said, I think, was really poignant, saying you don't need a license to make a difference.
You don't.
Why are those peer groups so important?
I think talking with someone who's had lived experience, talking with someone who's walked in your shoes, talking with someone who may have experienced what you experienced and how they navigated it can be very helpful, can be self-affirming. And that makes all the difference in the world. You feel like you're not alone.
Important reminder. Thanks so much. We'll check in again with you here in just a little bit.
It's so important to stop focusing on, having them reach their best potential and doing their best and getting their best grades. What do they do when they're upset? To ask them, are you suicidal? Have you thought about hurting yourself? Student-led.
It's a tragedy that can happen to any family. Hear from a Maine mom sharing her experience to help other teens in crisis. That's next when Maine's Total Health Special continues. Welcome back. The mother of a Freeport teen whose disappearance and death shook the community in 2022 is sharing her story. Mia Ferrara says her son Theo Ferrara died by suicide. And as Terry Stackhouse reports, she hopes her insight will help other families with teens in crisis.
Literally, a friend called me this weekend whose son was in crisis and panicking and not knowing what to do next. And knowing that I had advice for her, I think was really the tipping point.
Sitting in her counselor's office along the Androscoggin River in Topsom, Mia Ferrara describes her oldest child, Theo, as sweet, smart, and athletic. He played soccer, was artistic, and enjoyed studying geography. He was also very private.
You could have looked in an auditorium full of kids, and I can guarantee you that no one in that room would have pointed to Theo and said that he was the one that was going to die by suicide.
In September 2022, after getting off the school bus and before a soccer practice, Theo left the family's Freeport home and was seen walking on Flying Point Road near the border with Brunswick.
He was being picked up for soccer. I wanted to make sure he had something to eat before he went. Is when I first realized he was gone. And then I realized that his phone was in the house and he was gone.
Over several days, multiple agencies searched by land, air, and water.
How difficult are those 5 days, right?
Yeah. It was, I really did not know where he was. I did not know that he was suicidal. I really didn't know what happened. So that was really hard.
On Tuesday, September 27th, Ferrara's body was found in McCoy Bay.
I sometimes look back and think, I was his mom. How could I not know he was in so much pain? And other times I look back and I think, how was I supposed to know?
Mia has found some comfort in connecting with other grieving families and offering support.
Being able to sit with families that have lost kids to suicide when they're, when it's just recently happened has, I feel like, been helpful to them, but it also helps me.
Stacy Jenkins is a counselor specializing in grief and loss.
Coming from a place of curiosity versus judgment, we can do that in our parenting as well.
She helps establish boundaries and build relationships with parents and teens.
But if you take the time to say, hey, I know you're in the middle of something right now. At some point tonight, can I just have 10 minutes of your time, uninterrupted, tech-free? Can we just sit together?
Mia has 2 other children, and her approach to parenting has evolved.
You've got to check in, and you've got to ask, not to solve it, but to listen. And I think I've learned to listen differently. What I want people to understand is, our kids are struggling, and it's so important to stop focusing on, having them reach their best potential and doing their best and getting their best grades. It is so much more important to understand what your kids are doing for their own mental health. What do they do when they're upset? To ask them, are you suicidal? Have you thought about hurting yourself?
Remember, help is always available. You could reach the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 988. Maine also has crisis receiving centers and mobile crisis response teams. We have links to information on our website.
You have to keep the conversation happening. Because when you're that low, you think no one can help you.
If you or your teen needs help but are struggling to find a provider, Jenkins has some tips. First, start by contacting your pediatrician. They can help guide the process finding an appropriate provider. Use your social network to ask for a referral. Reach out to a school nurse or guidance counselor. They can offer immediate support and help navigating the search.
The high school principal would say that it has really changed how they talk about mental health. They started a student-led mental health club within the school, and now there's one at Greeley, and there's also one at Cape Elizabeth.
Mia tells us Theo was kind and hopes we can learn from that, too.
I think that Theo would have wanted everyone to put their phones down and to connect, which you don't hear from many teens, but that's what he would have wanted.
And that was Terry Stackhouse reporting for us. That was a very important message for all Maine families. And if you or someone you know needs to talk to somebody right now, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available. You can call or text 988 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And Jane Van Bramer with Sweetser is back with us. Jane, you know, adolescence and childhood is so important, not just for physical development, but mental development as well. We were talking about some of the statistics earlier. 14,000 Mainers ages 6 to 17 have depression. Seems like quite a lot. What do you tell teens or young people who are struggling with hopelessness or depression?
Well, I think you tell them that there is help available and there is hope available, that they don't have to feel this way, that they can be connected to services, that we can help them feel better, and that this won't last forever. That you've got to impart that hope, and sometimes we have to carry that for them so that they believe that it can be different in the future. And reaching out, as you said, that number 988, don't hesitate to call. If you suspect your child, your loved one, your neighbor, your coworker, your friend is suffering, reach out, make that call.
And I think it's really important that we talk about talking.
Absolutely.
It seems to be a theme throughout all of the questions and segments that we've been having here. But why is it so hard for teens to open up about their feelings? Why is talking about it so difficult, not just for men, but for teens as well?
I think that's actually very true. And what we want them to understand is that these illnesses are pretty common. 1 in 6 teens will experience a mental disorder in any given year. The statistics you quoted, they're very common. And there is help available. There are interventions that work that can make them feel better. And they can get past this. They can move past it.
Mia Ferrara, the woman that we just heard from in the story before, said that you should just outwardly ask, are you suicidal? Are you considering suicide? Is that how you would encourage parents to talk to their teens about this if they think that to be the case?
It is very important to be direct. I mean, there are some fallacies out there that if I ask the question, I'm planting the seed. That has not shown to be the case. So it is important to say, sometimes when kids are depressed or when they're feeling the way you are, they feel like they might hurt themselves or even kill themselves. Are you feeling like that? You have to be direct and ask that question and then seek the appropriate services immediately.
All right, Jane, so much. We'll be checking in again throughout the hour. I appreciate it. John, over to you.
And when it comes to our mental health, you never know when it might just become too much all at once. Jessica Gagne introduces us to a mobile crisis team that can help right there in a time of need. And even Maine's bravest need someone to talk to. Kate McCusker will tell us about an award-winning program created by the Augusta Fire Department to help their fellow firefighters. That's when our Mental Health in Maine special returns. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Mental Health in Maine. I'm Megan Torgeson.
I'm John Krasos. When you do need help, taking that first step of reaching out can certainly be pretty stressful. Fear of what will happen when you call or text a hotline. It can stop people from accessing the resources that are available.
And to shed light on the process and break down the barriers, Jessica Gagne met up with the Opportunity Alliance to demonstrate what happens when you reach out to its mobile crisis response team for help.
You never know where you'll be when it all becomes too much. Maybe sitting in your car, maybe at home. No matter your location, the Opportunity Alliance can come to you in your time of need.
We're essentially like mental health first responders, and that doesn't exist other than going to the emergency room or calling the police, who neither of those are trained to just help through a bad moment, a bad day. So it gives another option that's easily accessible and immediately accessible for people who are struggling in the moment.
Here's how it works. The first step is to reach out to the Maine crisis line at 1-888-568-1112. You don't even have to call. A text is all it takes to get the conversation started. You get a note back immediately saying your message was received and you're being connected to resources. Minutes later, you're texting with a real person, in this case Mariah, who asks what's going on and how they can best help. If you need or would prefer in-person help, that's when the mobile crisis unit is dispatched.
We will come anywhere that is safe to come to, whether that's your home, the side of the road, a park, McDonald's. As long as it is safe for you and us, we will come meet you wherever you'd like us to.
When help arrives, how you proceed is completely up to you.
Thanks for coming out. It's been a rough day.
Sounds like it. Are you okay talking? Do you want to stay here? Do you want to sit over there?
Let's go over there if that's okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's go.
This is a simulation, but the Opportunity Alliance says it's a good model for what you can expect from the mobile crisis unit. A trained and licensed professional will listen, offer options, and help you get to a place where you're more comfortable. That could include the option for a short stay at Broadway Crossings, a home run by the Opportunity Alliance where you can get round-the-clock support in a safe and approachable environment.
It's a house, so we've got a living room where we're watching movies, making popcorn, we eat dinner together, we celebrate holidays, birthdays together, and people tend to feel safe and comfortable when they're there.
Any time of the day or night, no matter where you are in Maine, you're not alone as long as you have this number. Whether you just need to talk or you need a lot more, the Opportunity Alliance is ready to meet you where you're at. For Maine's Total Coverage, I'm Jessica Gagne.
And in addition to someone you can call, the state also offers somewhere you can go. The Living Room Crisis Center, for example, that's located on Elm Street in Portland. This is the state's first 24/7 crisis receiving center. Anyone is welcome at any time, regardless of what they're experiencing. Visitors are able to meet with a peer, someone who has lived experience of a crisis, or speak with a clinician to create a plan on how to move forward. Visitors can stay for just about 24 hours, but they can return at any time, and no one has been turned away.
We're pretty good at helping people get the resources they need within that period of time and transitioning to the appropriate level of care. So that could be sober living for somebody that is interested in initiating recovery. It could be that it's a crisis residential placement for somebody that needs a little bit of a longer term solution. It could be that you're being referred for therapy or ongoing psychiatry. It really depends on your individual needs.
And by the way, that center also has showers, a place to do laundry, snacks, and extra clothes. They encourage anyone to drop by. You'll be welcomed regardless of what you're going through. Jane is here with us once again, and I think one of the things that's we've been thinking a lot about is some of these symptoms we've been talking about seem like things that may happen in everyday life, right? But how do you know when you're at that point where it reaches that crisis level?
So I think a definition of a crisis is somewhat individualized. So what you might experience as a crisis, I might not. But it usually typically is a significant behavior change. So you're talking about a large increase in depression. You're talking about anxiety that is so overwhelming that you're really incapacitated. You're talking about, maybe seeing or hearing things that aren't there. A withdrawal, being in the throes of a withdrawal. I would encourage folks, when in doubt, to reach out. There's no harm in calling 988. You know, these calls are triaged, and crisis workers are only dispatched if it's felt that you are in a crisis. So there's no harm in calling.
And when we think about a crisis, we might think of something like trauma or abuse, but what about some other things that pop up in life? Maybe a breakup or losing your job or a financial struggle. How do you realize when that kind of situation, again, goes to that crisis point?
I would say if it really incapacitates you. If you have the wherewithal to look for a therapist and go through that process and can wait, then probably a therapist is the right track for you. But if you feel you really can't get out of bed, can't eat or drink, hasn't slept in a couple of days, that's really signs that you're in a crisis.
And being from Sweetser, we know Sweetser providing many services to many Mainers here in Maine. When you are in that crisis point, what can Sweetser do to help?
So Sweetser actually is the largest mobile crisis provider in the state. We cover 9 counties. So when you call 988, your call is triaged and a crisis worker will be dispatched to you. Our staff oftentimes go out. We will meet you wherever you are. You can be in a doctor's office, you can be under a bridge, you can be in a school, in a pediatrician's office, at your home. We will come to you. And what we do basically is first we work to calm the situation, or the term we use is to de-escalate the situation. We try to get everyone calm, figure out what you need. We'll do an assessment, determine what level of care you need, and also create a safety plan. You know, Sweetser also runs crisis residential units. Maybe your crisis is not such that you need to be in an inpatient hospital, but maybe you need a little respite. Maybe you need a couple of days away in a safe and natural setting, in a home-like setting, where we can help you and provide therapeutic interventions.
Okay, really appreciate it. Jane Van Bramer with Sweetser. We'll check in with you again here in just a little bit. Megan, over to you.
All right. First responders are often on the scene of many Mainers' worst days, and that can take a toll on firefighters, police officers, and EMTs long after they return to headquarters. Kate McCusker takes us to the Augusta Fire Department and shows us how a program is focused on the mental health of its firefighters.
As they respond to countless emergencies and encounter a variety of situations, the Augusta Fire Department makes sure to support the mental health of their members.
I've been traumatized over my 37 years with a multitude of traumas. I seek therapy. So that gives the members of the group, all right, if the chief's willing to put himself out there, then why can't we do it too? Mental health and well-being.
Augusta Fire Chief Dave Groder started a peer support team for the department in 2021.
Our morale was down and we weren't sure how to tackle that. So we know our job is stressful, so we decided to look at a peer support group.
He says it's important for his staff to have someone they can reach out to after encountering traumatic events on the job.
Through talking with somebody or even a peer after every call, get it out, talk about what your feelings are, and then you're better apt to survive a 25-year career.
Members of the department are able to vote for the fellow employees they want on the team, and those members were then trained so they can offer a shoulder to lean on and even recommend further resources if necessary.
We're not therapists, our peer support team's not psychologists, they don't do anything like that, but they are there to talk to people.
These resources for mental health are not just for employees. Family members can also find support and training on how to respond when their loved one returns from a traumatic shift.
We understand that when we hire somebody, we hire a family, not just the individual. The employee gets the trauma, but when they go home, their family sees it as well.
And this work has paid off, as the department has been awarded for their efforts.
We're at a good point right now with our mental health, I think. I mean, we can always do more, trust me on that.
The chief also tells me he encourages other departments to have at least some sort of resource for their members, because you never know what someone's going through. In Augusta, I'm Kate McCusker for Maine's Total Coverage.
And we do have much more ahead this half hour, including using your mind to get out of your head. We'll talk meditation and mindfulness with former ABC journalist Dan Harris.
It seems so unreal to me and surreal to me because I don't remember doing it.
And I think that just each of us individuals in the world, we need to kind of, have a change of heart.
And from darkness to light, Kathleen Jordan introduces us to a Maine social worker using the darkest moment of her life to encourage others to seek help. That's when Mental Health in Maine, a Maine's Total Coverage special, returns.
Welcome back to this Maine's Total Coverage special. Many moms struggle mentally after giving birth. A report from the National Institutes of Health in 2022 found 1 in 7 women will develop postpartum depression. It's a time when new parents are focused on their baby, their own well-being is pushed aside sometimes. But there are resources out there even beyond a doctor's office. A Brunswick company offers a weekly support group.
Society says you worked so hard for this babies, and you should be grateful and you should be happy all of the time. And how can you ever feel like resentment? And until you're in it, you don't know. When having emotional breakdown moments, you have that person, and you get to bring that stuff to group too and not feel judged by it, and you feel very supported by it.
Maine Mother and Company offers many resources for moms, mentally and physically. Women who spend 2 hours each week talking about the good, the bad, and the difficulty of being new moms, all in a judgment-free zone.
There is always hope. That is the message from someone who lost all of hers last fall. Heather Wilson worked in mental health support for years before she hit rock bottom and tried to kill herself. As Kathleen Jordan explains, even in her recovery, Heather is still trying to support others, and she has some help.
If I can help one person out there by sharing my strength and experience with them, then it's all worthwhile.
Heather Wilson says her mental health struggle started, like many, in her childhood.
There was a lot of alcoholism and abuse, physical, emotional, sexual.
She herself turned to alcohol to try and cope. By 19, she was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and paranoid schizophrenia.
It was a really dark time in my life.
She fought through it, and years later, motivated by her pain, she turned to a career in helping people like her.
And I went back for my degree in mental health and human services, and I was a case manager for a little while.
But it was really peer support that she loved. She did it for a decade before she hit the darkest depression she has ever faced. Things were so bad, she rarely got out of bed and couldn't work. With no job, no car, no home, and no hope, on October 22nd, she stepped in front of a car going 50 miles an hour.
I don't remember the direction, the car, the color, anything that was going on. I just remember waking up on the pavement in the rain, sitting up, and like trying to stand up, and my legs wouldn't move. And I'm looking at them, and they were all contorted, and I just kind of flopped back down on the pavement.
She came to, surrounded by friends, praying. She spent months in the hospital, then time in a rehab facility.
It's gone very well.
Before moving in briefly with Fran White.
As of December, I retired after 41 years of being a clinical social worker. You know, it comes to mind, the fool for Jesus, but this is who we are, my husband and I, and this is how we treat people.
Ever since the accident.
All Fran thought was, what can I do? She reached out to her community to help raise money for Heather's comeback, finding her a place to live. As social workers, they know the strain on our mental health system, but they say there are resources available in Maine right now, like 211.
There are some resources out there that are tremendously helpful. One of them particularly is the Intentional Warm Line. I know that they're open 24/7, 365, and you don't need any insurance or anything. And they're a wonderful resource for people that need someone to listen to or to talk to or get feedback on stuff.
Fran says better support can also start with each of us.
And I think that just each of us individuals in the world, we need to kind of, have a change of heart, which is easier said than done. But for people to, care for their brother or sister in the neighborhood or whatever, we have that kind of a neighborhood here. It's a wonderful neighborhood.
Heather is grateful for them, especially Fran, and she just wants others to know you're not alone.
That there is hope out there. No matter what you've been through, what you're going through, there's always hope.
For Maine's Total Coverage, I'm Kathleen Jordan.
And when it comes to recovery, sometimes it's really easier to talk to somebody who's been in the same place where you are. Jane from Sweetser back with us, and Sweetser does offer certified peer-to-peer counseling. So tell me a little bit about how it works.
Sure. So we have an 800 number. It's our peer support line. It is available to anyone in the state of Maine, and it is free and it is low barrier. So if you don't want to give your name, you don't even have to give your name. And it is answered by someone who has experienced either a mental health illness or a substance use disorder, but is in their own recovery. They're certified and they are trained to provide these services, and it's really relationship based. These calls typically last 20 minutes to a half hour. They're not brief calls. They're available 24/7, 365 days a year, and we encourage people to reach out and get that support. We even get seniors calling who feel isolated and they want to just touch base with someone. So I do think it's an important service. It's a free service. It's available all the time. If you don't know where to start or have some minor concerns, it's a great place to start.
And what's interesting, I heard you mention earlier in our show here that, it's about talking and it's about being with a peer. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a doctor's office.
Absolutely. We get over 26,000 calls a year on this line. So this is a resource that's really well used and really does make a difference to folks.
And if someone's at home and maybe wants to become a peer counselor, what is the process like and how do they do that?
So DHHS at the state offers those certification programs. Part of it is online, part of it is in person, but I would encourage them to reach out and to find out more information.
All right, Jane, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And still to come, from TV journalist to mindfulness guru. Next, we talk with Dan Harris about how a very public panic attack led to him finding ways to be 10% happier. That's when our Mental Health in Maine special returns. Stay with us.
Health news now. One of the world's most commonly prescribed medications may be providing a big bonus. Researchers report people who take cholesterol-lowering drugs called statins for at least 5 years may also lower their risk for cancer. But it's too early to prescribe statins slowly for cancer production. That does it for news. We're going to go back now to Robin and Charlie.
So it's not uncommon to have a panic attack, but it is uncommon to have your attack broadcast to millions. And that's what happened to former ABC anchor Dan Harris while reading the news a few years back for Good Morning America. You might remember Dan from his days here in Maine, anchoring the news in Bangor and in Portland as well.
And so that panic attack led Dan to finding ways to calm his mind. He has since written several books and now has a podcast. You may have heard that one as well, called 10% Happier. Dan spoke with our Terry Stackhouse.
And I suddenly lost the ability to breathe. Health news now. One of the world's most commonly prescribed medications may be providing a big bonus. Researchers report people who take cholesterol-lowering drugs called statins for at least 5 years may also lower their risk for cancer. But it's too early to prescribe statins slowly for cancer production.
How often are you hearing anecdotes from people who have their own sort of transformative moment like you did, where they're pursuing something new with their mental health or dabbling in meditation or other forms of self-care?
One of the best parts of this new part of my life is that I hear incredible stories from people about what you just described, which is to have scary, traumatic moments, whether it's a panic attack or massive grief because of an unexpected loss or uncovering something that happened in their childhood that they're finally reckoning with, that these difficult aspects of life, which are, universals.
10 years ago, Dan Harris released his first book, 10% Happier. After a more than 2-decade career in news, which included years in Maine, Harris decided to focus solely on mindfulness and meditation.
I kind of burned out a little bit on chasing the news. And, I still love storytelling and broadcasting or podcasting, and I love storytelling in all of the ways in which we can do it now.
10% Happier is now a business with an app for guided meditations, courses, and a podcast series hosted by Harris.
I'm a big fan of this podcast, so...
You're having these conversations with experts so regularly. Is there any piece of information maybe you've learned recently that took you by surprise that has helped you in your own journey?
Thoughts are, as my meditation teacher Joseph Goldstein likes to say, little more than nothing. They're these quantum bursts of energy in the mind. There's no substance to them, and yet we act them out and believe them. They're like, again, to quote my meditation teacher, tiny dictators that we take seriously. But we don't have to.
Harris specializes in trying to serve skeptics.
Okay, so let's do it. Let's actually meditate. For only 90 seconds, I promise you'll survive. Close your eyes if you want. Second step. Focus your full attention on the feeling of your breath coming in and going out.
We see so much data about the state of mental health in our country and in the state of Maine. And particularly among young people, there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression. And some of your transformative years as a person in their early 20s, you spent here in Maine. What kind of advice would you share with yourself at that age that you've learned since?
If you're interested in being happy and healthy and successful, it's good to get into exercise and count your steps and eat well and sleep well and all that stuff. But the most important variable is the quality of your relationships. We're social animals. If you don't pay attention to that, you're in bad shape. Getting outside is really helpful. Taking walks, it's really helpful. And so if you can get in the habit of doing that, and if I could go back to my 21 to 28-year-old self, I would tell that dude to get outside more often. I lived on Chandler's Wharf in downtown Portland, and I almost never, stood on the balcony and listened to the seagulls.
1 or 2 minutes a day, Harris says, is okay. Meditation, in his view, is one tool in a broader mental health strategy, which prioritizes social connection and getting outside.
It doesn't have to be a huge commitment. Do it for a minute or two a day. How often have you been to the North Woods? It's incredibly beautiful up there. Take a drive to Caribou. These things can have a really huge impact on your well-being.
And Jane, President and CEO of Sweetser, is back now with us. And Jane, we have covered a lot of information on our mental health state tonight.
And so really, though, what should be the takeaways as we wrap up here this evening when it comes to seeking treatment?
So I think the important takeaways are that there is hope and there is help available. So we encourage folks to reach out. We have a Promise Line and Access 800 number that folks can call. They can also email info@sweetser.org. You know, at Sweetser, we believe in a world that's free from mental health stigma and discrimination. And we believe that everyone should have access to the treatment and support they need to recover. We change lives every day, and we live for that. So please reach out. We're here to help.
All right, Jane, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for joining us for Mental Health in Maine. I'm Megan Torgeson. Many of the resources and stories you saw tonight are in the mental health section of WMTW.com and Maine's Total Coverage app.
A lot of important information there. I'm John Chrysos. Again, those resources are for everyone really seeking help or mental health. Very important. It's not a weakness, it's a strength when you do look for that help. We do thank you for joining us. Have a great night. We'll see you back here tonight at 11.